When we started Sabbathing, I had just this big question in my mind of, is this even realistic? Is it relevant? Is this going to work? Because, like I mentioned, like all your listeners, we live a busy life. And I kept asking myself, how are we going to get everything done in 6 days? I felt like I couldn't get everything done in 7 days. Very quickly, because God is so faithful and He honors when we abide by what He calls us to. Very quickly, we saw that when we began resting 1 day a week, we became more effective, more creative, more productive. Like you were saying, there is this thing in your mind that, okay, I need to be really efficient with the rest of this time if we're going to rest on Sabbath. And so we started making a whole lot more of those other 6 days. And I'll give you an example from my husband. This was kind of shocking when we saw this. When we started Sabbathing, he had been in business for, I believe, 4 years at that point, somewhere around there. He was a one-man show. He owns a construction company. He was exhausted. We were paycheck to paycheck. We were just depleted. And then we began resting 1 day a week. And after 3 years, he has hired 9 employees, moved into an office building, has all these strategies and systems in place, and grew his revenue by 500% while resting 1 day a week with his family. He did not hustle to get it done. God is so faithful. And it's not like this, do this and you're going to see this thing. It's God's math works. We see that with the Israelites in the wilderness when He first called them to Sabbath. When God called the Israelites to Sabbath in Exodus 16, they didn't have a concept for this. Like, yeah, they could think back to the creation story where God rested, but God was calling them to an act of faith. Don't go out and gather food on this day. Sabbath and rest is always a call to faith, to trusting God. And when we do, we see that His math, His design works. Yeah, but it makes sense when you think about it scientifically because God created our minds, our brains to thrive on rest, just like we were looking at other areas of creation. And so I didn't expect this when I wrote this book, but it's opened up avenues for me to speak in business and corporate realms, faith-based and not faith-based. So I gave a presentation on Sabbath rest to a group of 8 businessmen, half of them following Jesus, half of them not, like tough, like construction men. They were crying because this is poignant. And we see that, like, the reason my husband was able to grow his business, the reason that God's math works, His promises stand, for one. And also, when you look at our minds and our brains and how they just operate so much better function, better memory, better able to solve problems, better able to respond rather than react, that's going to make a better leader. That's going to make a better business owner. That's going to make a better parent, a better spouse. And we see it all goes back to God's designs.